President Joe Biden speaking directly to the American people is at our town hall, CNN town hall in Baltimore. Anderson, great job of moderating that and making news, because this is what the president went beyond anything that he has said before about the filibuster. Watch this and watch his body language.
Are you saying once you get this current agenda passed on spending and social programs, that you would be open to fundamentally altering the filibuster or doing away with it? Or doing away with it?
Well, that remains to be seen. Exactly what that means in terms of fundamentally altering it, whether or not we just end the filibuster straight up. There are certain things that are just sacred rights. One's a sacred obligation that we're never going to renege on a debt. We're the only nation in the world. We have never, ever reneged on a single debt.
But when it comes to voting rights...
Voting rights is equally as consequential.
When it comes to voting rights, just so I'm clear, though, you would entertain the notion of doing away with the filibuster on that one issue? Is that correct?
And maybe more.
And maybe other issues.
You see that? So, and maybe more. And maybe more. Making the point of what I was trying to make to Chris there. Another big moment, though, the president admitting that it wasn't appropriate for him to say anybody who refuses a subpoena from the January 6th committee should be prosecuted by the Justice Department. And listen to his answer to a voter who asked why he doesn't do what Republicans do and just push his agenda through.
President Biden, I had so much faith in your election win, but based on history, the bipartisan efforts of the Democratic Party are held hostage by rogue moderates and Republicans. Why not do like the Republicans and usher through the Democratic agenda?
Well, two reasons. If you notice, the Republicans haven't passed a single solitary thing. Zero. So ushering through their agenda right now is just stop Biden. Oh, I shouldn't make it so personal. Stop my administration. That's what the agenda is. It's much easier to stop something than to start something. We're down to 4 or 5 issues, which I'm not going to negotiate on national television, as you might guess.
We'd be interested in hearing them if you want.
No, I know. But all kidding aside, I think we can get there.
So interesting. Can you imagine? We haven't had that in a while. A president actually admitting, I shouldn't have said something. I was wrong to say that. That's big. And then saying, you know what? Their agenda is to stop me or my administration. I shouldn't make this personal. That's where we are right now. President Biden promising to make government work for the American people. But 9 months since he took the oath of office, can he get his party to get out of its own way and make it happen? That is the question. A lot to talk about now. CNN's Caitlin Collins is here, as well as David Chalian and Nia Malika Henderson. Good to see all three of you. Thank you so much. Caitlin, I'm going to start with you, traveling with the president. The president making huge news tonight, I think, on the filibuster, talking about the need to fundamentally, possibly fundamentally altering it in some way. What do you gather from that? What are you hearing from folks at the White House?
Yeah, Don, I agree with you that I actually think that was one of the newsworthiest answers that the president gave during this town hall. And I think the reason it's important is it's obvious the president doesn't have a vote when it comes to the filibuster. He is the president. It's not actually up to him, but it is symbolic in the sense that this is someone who spent 3 decades in the Senate. He is a Senate institutionalist. And so for the president to come out tonight and say that they think that there could be a point where they have to fundamentally alter the filibuster or potentially get rid of it is incredibly significant. And I think you're seeing the president use that language, of course, in light of the fact that Republicans have blocked a voting rights bill 3 times in this Congress. And that is something that seems to be weighing on the president as he was talking about that tonight. Though when Anderson did follow up, he said there could be other reasons to get rid of the filibuster or to potentially change it when he was speaking about that. And so
Hey, Caitlin,
I think that's
did he say other reasons?
This is something that the president...
Was he saying other reasons, or there may be more beyond the filibuster, or more things beyond the, that he's willing to fundamentally change, or more issues, other issues rather than just voting rights? Because it wasn't quite clear of what he meant by and more.
I think Anderson's... I think Anderson's follow was, is this something about just for voting rights? And the president said, quote, maybe more. Of course, hinting that there could be more to come on that, which is incredibly significant. Of course, he did talk about the realities of what's happening right now when it comes to the filibuster, because he said if he got into a debate about the filibuster at this time, he would lose at least 3 votes, he believes, on this big economic package that, of course, Democrats are still negotiating over, and he needs the support of every single Senate Democrat. But he was talking about the power that Senate Democrats have over his agenda. Of course, we'll get into that, I know, in the details that he revealed here tonight. But saying that about the filibuster is symbolic. And of course, we've heard from Senator Joe Manchin and others who say they are opposed to changing the filibuster, even having a carve out when it comes to something as what we were recently discussing, raising the nation's borrowing limit. But I do think it's significant for the president to say there could be a day when they do decide to fundamentally alter it. And of course, it does really make you think about the trajectory once they get, if they get this economic package passed, how he then focuses on that.
Yeah, it was interesting. To your point, he said, when you have a slim majority like that, and when it's 50, you have 50 little presidents, or 50 presidents, more than just him. David, as he was talking about the filibuster, you know, I was thinking, well, it's what he's not saying, right? He explained what he has to get done first, what he thought his first priority was, right? And that's his economic agenda, and then he would worry about voting rights. And I'm going to talk to Nia about a second, is that the right thing? But is it what he did not say there that, or maybe he could not say there?
Well, I'm with you. I don't know that I understand fully Chris's read on this. I thought it was very significant and not just iterative. I think the president put himself in a different position on this long-running debate about the filibuster, which is preventing some major agenda items, whether voting rights, police reform, what have you. There's a whole blockade. And by the way, when he said maybe more, I mean, he indicated what one of the other things beyond voting rights that he wants to get rid of the filibuster on potentially, which is dealing with the debt ceiling, because we just went through a whole process where Republicans were filibustering, threatened to filibuster the whole notion of raising the nation's debt limit so that America does not go into its first default ever in its history and send the economy into a total tailspin potentially. So he clearly is giving this some thought, and I thought tonight just emerged in a totally different place. To Caitlin's other point, and I think this is so interesting, we rarely get real, candid, out loud thoughts about the politics of a moment. That's not what we usually get from a politician.
Did he say something like that's a fact, Jack, or something? You can laugh or whatever, but that's the truth or something.
But he just saying, like, I don't want to trip up my economic agenda by injecting an effort right now to get rid of the filibuster. That is going to be the next project. I need all those senators right now. He just put it out plainly to people in his base, I think, most importantly, to hear why he hasn't made getting rid of the filibuster on voting rights a higher priority. It's because he needs those votes on this economic package.
Okay, so, you know, usually people say, how does it play in Peoria? The question is, Nia, how does this play in Philadelphia? How does it play in Atlanta? How does it play in Chicago? How does it play in Baltimore? How does it play in the cities where large groups of African Americans showed up and made him the president of the United States?
You know, listen, those folks want to hear more. Progressives want to hear more from him on the filibuster. I think they will be pleased with what they heard from him tonight, going a little bit further, saying that he might be willing for a carve out for voting rights and other issues. You know, probably the bigger question, though, is how does it play in West Virginia and how does it play in Arizona with Sinema and Manchin? They seem wedded to the filibuster, not willing to think about any sort of carve-outs for any of these issues. Joe Manchin's bill was sort of the skinny voting rights bill that was put on the floor of the Senate, and it got no Republican votes. So I think if you're a Democrat, you're hoping that perhaps the Republican obstinance on voting rights will move Joe Manchin, will move Senator Sinema. We'll see if that happens, and then you add that up with what Biden said today, maybe you get somewhere. But so far, even given what Biden said tonight, I think if you're progressive, you're still looking at President Sinema and President Manchin on this issue, because they hold the keys to the kingdom when it comes to this very critical issue of democracy and voting rights, something that our forefathers fought and marched for and died for, that is very much under assault in this country,
Nia,
and being rolled back in several states.
But don't you think he was very candid about his negotiations with him, where he stands with them and with his agenda and with what he's trying to do, and without going too far? Because I'm not sure. I wish you could see afterwards. I was struck by him holding his head down, thinking about what he had just said and what he was prepared to do. And I think he was probably thinking, did I answer that correctly? Because yes, African Americans overwhelmingly supported me. And that's it. This is after his answer. You know?
Yeah. I mean, he is hearing from constituents all across the country, African Americans, progressives, about this issue, and they are unnerved by where this is right now, which is nowhere. 3 times now, this has been blocked by Republicans in the Senate. They are asking themselves, what the hell is the presidency for, right, if you are not going to do something on this fundamental issue? Overwhelming support from African Americans, and we know that these voting laws in these states across the country are going to disproportionately affect African American voters. That is what they are designed to do.